But in terms of being MVP favorite, obviously Will and I would be rooting for our guy Nikola Jokic. But you and I got into an interesting back and forth the other day on kind of in response to Hardwood Knocks. Shout out to Dan and Grant. Love those guys on that show. Definitely check them out. Will, why don't you explain the controversy and then we can kind of just talk about it. I don't know. The question. Explain the question and then we can kind of go through it in less controversial.
The question is talking about how many wins we would have to win if Jokic was going to win MVP, because as we know, like if you get a certain seed that's pretty low, it's just an anomaly historically for MVPs to win when you're a very low seed, unless you do something really crazy like when Russ averaged a triple-double, things like that.
Or when I think they were the same seed that the Nuggets were when when Jokic won his second MVP, right?
Yeah, we were like the sixth seed
that year. Yeah.
But Grant had a funny take that I also agreed with, and I reposted it just because he was like, I don't care how many games. They could win 30 games. I'd still give Jokic the MVP.
I think they were so inspired by you reposting it that they used it as promo for their show.
Because I just clicked it and I linked the episode underneath, which if you haven't listened to it, like their show's awesome. So if you're listening and you're hearing this, go check them out. And then they reposted it. And I had even tweeted something similar to that. It's just hard because he's already won 3. So it's like, hang it. We should retire from the discourse because he doesn't really need more. You know what I mean? But my whole thing is I'm like, dang, I'm super into how well he's playing. And I even want to make maybe more of a point to talk about him more, even on this show, just because I think it's like he's the one piece that maybe
we do it after a couple of better games than he's had. But I would be down for that also.
Yeah, just because, you can take him for granted and we have other pieces they're the questions of the team, whereas Jokic is not. So I think I've been sucked back into the MVP discourse where I do want him to win again just because of what he's doing. And I've always said if he averages a triple-double, I want him to win it because they gave it to Russ for that. Clearly, like the circumstances were different. No one had ever done it in a while since Russ has done it, and maybe triple doubles are becoming more common.
I mean, Luka is also racking them up. Jalen Johnson's got a few. We had Cade Cunningham, so they are becoming a little bit more common.
Yeah, for sure. Granted, this is early. If we stop the season now, I would strongly argue Jokic is the clear player who should win it.
Stop the count.
Yeah, but so when Grant was saying that, I was like, I agree with this. Like at this point, I don't. It's hard to say that no one can catch Jokic and it's over with so many games left, obviously. But if things hold how they are through the rest of the season, obviously you'd be making the same types of arguments. Because
so if they hold for the rest of the season and the Nuggets continue at this win rate, so where are they in the standings right now? They're sitting at 5th, right? We got OKC at number 1. So let's talk through just kind of briefly. The main candidates are obviously Jokic, SGA. Giannis is definitely in conversations, especially with the Bucks playing better, and who knows how much higher they could climb in the East standings with the struggles the Magic have had with their injuries and all that. Luka, obviously, I was like, I'm just trying to think of names here with Dallas stuff. Probably poised. Like I would, if I were a betting woman, I'd probably say that Dallas is on track to be the 2nd seed in the Western Conference, even though they're not right now. Either 2nd or 3rd. I think Houston is probably not going to drop off too much. Is there anybody that I'm missing? I think probably Jason Tatum, obviously in the East with the Cavs, and the Knicks are also climbing up. So is it Brunson or is it Cat? Both are playing really well this season. I think Cat's having a career year, as long as he can stay healthy, right? Now, look, we could be let's say what if the Thunder hit a skid and then the Rockets end up in the 1 seed? I'd probably skip them. Because I think that, a Luka or a Jokic are more important to their team as because it's an individual award. It's not a team award. I think one of the things you said in our online back and forth was your prize for the best record is the 1 seed. I forget if that was you or Dan.
Oh, I definitely didn't say that.
Okay. So it might've been Dan. Your prize for the best record is the 1 seed. This is an individual award. And I think that's a fair point to make. which is why you would skip over like teams that are like overall good teams. That's why the Celtics, like nobody from the Celtics was really an MVP candidate last year. I know like Tatum was like on ballots, but he didn't even make top 5. Brunson beat him out for that. So and Brunson had like a lot of circumstances with the Knicks going on last year. And he really like put that team on his back, right? To make them the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference is crazy. But the East was pretty injured last year. So even the super injured Knicks were able to climb up that high. My main point that I just wanted to make here was that I do think that there is a threshold of games that the team needs to win with Jokic, that Jokic needs to help the team win, him to win MVP. As in light of especially the individual performances that other guys on teams that are winning more with them are putting up. Obviously, the year that Jokic won as a 6th seed, I think that this was like a great shout out for Poissonian Distribution on Twitter. Great account. They've pointed out that basically every year that the MVP award for the last like 20 years or something, if you look at the top 3 candidates, the guy who won the most games was like in the game and their team won 1 out of those top 3. And that was like the 23 season was the anomaly because Joel missed a bunch of games and he still won MVP. And even though his team I forget if the Sixers actually had a better record, but they were like, no, the Nuggets were the higher seed in the West also. So it was like they might have had a better record as a team, but Joel missed games and they won games without him. So it was like that, right? So that's like part of it. And that has stuck with me just in terms of like the precedent of the award. And it's not that I care so much about precedent that I'm not willing to like rewrite a rule, but I think it told me that one of the things that this award is supposed to value is helping your team win games, not just winning your minutes, but winning games. And obviously the minutes that you're off matter too, as we've talked about. If you're winning your minutes enough to help your team win games, like that matters a lot, right? Because the whole point of the regular season is to win games, right? Yeah. And so I think the most valuable thing you can do is to help your team win games. And so that's why I'm like kind of laser focused on win total. It's not that I care, like I'm not like locked into seeding like as a concept. Like I don't necessarily care about that. But the idea is you help your team win games and you rise high enough in the seed in the standings so that you have a high seed. Like the best thing you could do is give your team like, first seed in the conference, have home court advantage all the way through the playoffs, like all of that stuff. That's like, wow, that's super valuable to us as a team, right? To have won, like that's the value that you're giving us is these wins. And it's not just the winning your minutes. So it's like the constant translation of that to the actual wins. And so that's why I think that there should be a fewest number of games that the Nuggets could win that is like a real number. Because I think like Grant was kind of exaggerating in his sort of monologue about this, where he said like, I don't care if they win 30 games. So like, that's just, he's not winning MVP if they win 30 games. If they win 30 games, they'll be like, what is it, like 13th in the conference or something?
But that's also not going to happen. The Nuggets are going to win more
right.
than 30
It's also not going to happen. But then it sort of made me think like, what is the fewest number of games? Mm-hmm. Or like the reason I was focused on seeding is because we don't know what number of games you'll need to get a certain seed. And I think that's the ultimate like goal is to be at a certain point in the standings. That's why I ask that.
I think it also matters like how far away you are from other seeds around you. Like if you're 6th, but the second seed's like 2 games away. Sure, you have a much better case of being like we're
which I think
seed.
Was the case in the year that he won his second MVP, right? Like it was like a game and a half out of like 3rd or something.
I don't remember the numbers, but it was close. Yeah,
I think he won the most games out of like the top 3 candidates also because like he was just in every. He like played more games than those other guys and helped their team win. His team needed him to be on the floor to win.
I think he used to. He played like every game that season or something almost. I think he played 82 games. But
like MPJ and Jamal out, like that whole narrative was like, I think that was like legit because it's not like you're missing starters. And those guys, you don't get that cap space back to sign like replacement level players even. You're just left with who's left on your roster.
Yeah, for sure.
So that is different. And he was able to elevate guys around him to a point where he was like, had the best net rating on court of like all the, top MVP candidates that year, and, carried a team to the playoffs that had no business making the playoffs. So yeah, obviously I'm not arguing with his MVP case that year.
I mean, you had a good point too, where you're saying, Jokic isn't the runaway favorite. He's not the only one, because there's other cases for guys, and that's
and
cool.
that's my thing is like, if you're gonna buck precedent that way, because like if you were to like, let's say the Nuggets were like even the 8th seed, I just think that's too low, because you're in the play-in at that point. You might not even make it into the playoffs unless it's literally like a game's difference between 8 and like 5. But even then, like, I just think I think that's tough, because there are other guys that helped their teams get to higher seeds and had great individual performances as well, and have their own individual impact to help their teams. It's not like you're facing it's not like a bunch of dynasties up there necessarily. Like, obviously no one from like the KD Warriors was going to be considered for MVP, for example, or even though like I think LeBron won MVP when he was on the Heatles.
Yeah, I think he
so
did.
They didn't care then, but I don't think he had like super stiff competition.
There is that trend now where if you are on a really good team with a lot of all-stars or like superstars, so you're not going to get MVP, even though I didn't like argue this, and I'm not saying I believe this, but like when I think of SGA, I'm like, wow, he's on such a complete team. So like they're going to have,
yeah, but we just saw offensively, like they need him to get those buckets.
It actually was so funny, because right after us like arguing this, like Jokic had a bad-ish game against the Kings, and
it was awful. I think the Kings game was the Kings game worse than the Clippers game? I think it was.
I still think Jokic was better than people were saying, but
he was better defensively in the Clippers game. He was good defensively in both, like at least decent in the Kings game. He was really good in the Clippers game, I thought, defensively, but he was like really bad offensively in both. And I'm not out here trying to make other guys MVP cases, was the other thing. So the only way that I could go at this was really like poking holes at Jokic's case, because I didn't feel like making the SGA case or the Tatum case, but it was like, the only reason I'm doing this is because it's true that these other guys are having like really important standout seasons for their teams.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, wait, what's going on? Why are we poking holes in Jokic's case?
Yeah, it was because I was like too lazy and too much of a hater to actually like make the positive case for these other guys. Because I also don't want them to win. Like, I want the Nuggets to be, this is also like there was like an internal motivator of like, I want the Nuggets to just be good enough that this isn't a question. So I'm kind of annoyed at the suggestion of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I understand Nuggets fans definitely having a sort of, and I'm leaving here with something feeling about this season based on how it started and maybe how it's going. We'll see over the next decades. I do want the season to end on like a stronger note, whether they win a championship or not, because like when this team like plays together and like plays with joy and all of that, that also means that Jokic is having fun. Like, I don't like to picture Jokic like winning his 4th MVP on this like misery season
and being pissed off. Well,
and being pissed off. Yeah.
No matter what circle you're in, fan, voter, whatever, you're the way you conceptualize Jokic as an MVP is kind of like a referendum on the team a bit, and it's hard to like reconcile some of this where you're thinking, well, the Nuggets are so bad around the margins that they need Jokic to create all this value, and that's where the value is coming from. So then you're essentially saying the rest of the team's kind of shitty. Maybe not so bluntly, but in some way you can argue that. But
right, because like they kept citing the on-off case as like, and it is his strongest case, but I think the better, like it's his strongest case if you believe in weighing the on-offs as much as you do.
Yeah.
But especially if you're like, well, I'm not going to care about the wins, then it's like, well, I don't care about the off numbers then. But if you're using the on-offs as like it's just the explanation for why it's not more wins, then fine. But I'm not going to weight the on-offs as much when I'm measuring his individual impact, even though I obviously know that it's high. Like we've cited this stuff so much. But the other thing that Jokic has been the narrative or the argument that Jokic has been the beneficiary of for the last few years is he raises everybody up around him to be better. And I believe that. I think that's even true this year. But obviously, he can only do so much
Yeah, but
because some guys on the team have been struggling. And I'm not saying it's not me blaming him for other guys not being as good. It's just me bringing up like, hey, like this is an argument that that you guys have used in the past to make his case. So it's like, well, was he not actually doing as much to raise those other guys up as we thought? And it actually mattered to have like some good players around him. Turns out, yes. But it was just me kind of poking a bit at that particular argument for him.
Well,
because it'd been used in the past, and it's clearly like not as powerful this year, right?
With Facu Campazzo and that whole roster that was like real trash. I think they were still older players. So if Jokic is improving them, I think I'm thinking, is it easier for him to make someone better when they're vets versus young guys?
I think if someone knows how to do something, if they're like high IQ player and they know how to do something, even if they're limited in like a variety of ways, he can maximize the thing that they do the best.
Yeah.
But if you're a young player that is still trying to figure yourself out and you don't know what you're good at yet, that's harder. And I think we're seeing that with like a Peyton Watson, for example.
Yeah, and Jokic can't. That's like a coaching thing. That's definitely not something Jokic can do. Although I'm sure he like offers advice.
Just general player development. Sure, yeah.
And you're developing what you are good at, but also learning to play Jokic ball at the same time. Yeah. But like, I guess my only point was like, I am more in favor of trying to just like determine that even if we can't really quantify this, what the true value is that a single player provides to a team. And there's all kinds of stats, and this is why this whole thing is so hard to argue, and we use different things every year, and why it's not just stats that determines it, it's narrative and all this stuff, and why it's complicated.
Of course, it's narrative that determines it. The media literally votes on this award. It is a media-driven award ever since they, switched over to the media being the main voters of this.
And part of the narratives, like we brought up before, well, the Nuggets are not very good, and Jokic is making them good again. Rather than him being, the Nuggets have the best starting five in the league and Bruce Brown, and he should win MVP because they're so good. I don't love the best team, best player idea. I think it is phasing out.
Obviously, like we weren't going to give it to like Tatum last year.
Yeah,
that would have been ridiculous.
So it's phasing out. I was
also thinking the Nuggets were awesome last year, and we're in the tougher conference, so that's why I like at seed more than wins total. Also, that's another reason to look at seed more than wins.
It's kind of like the individual player requirement, the 65 games you have to play to even be considered for MVP. There's like an unwritten, like maybe you should win a certain amount of games if your team to be considered. And I also don't I'm getting to a point where I'm ready to not blame Jokic for anything or criticize the man. And I know that some people want to be objective and that's great. And, we can criticize players and stuff and talk about how Jokic
there's nothing to blame or criticize him for this season besides like the last two games offensively. He's had some games where he was bad on defense, but it was like when everybody was bad on defense and like this whole but he's not like there have been more games in the past where this is like you could like this loss was on Jokic.
Yeah.
Although I do think it might have been the first Dallas game and they ended up winning it and I was like, ooh, that wasn't like a great start, but they finished strong and won it. Maybe it was the second Dallas game where they lost. But sometimes you do have a Jokic loss, right? But no, like I see your point. Like I get it. But I think that when you're talking about most valuable, I think the value has to matter somewhere. It can't just be like on the stat sheet. And I think the value of a valuable player is helping your team win, not just your minutes, but games.
Yeah.
And I think that like I get it. You don't play all 48 minutes. One of the things I do want to point out over the last couple of games, though, is that the bench has actually been like decent. They're not like winning their minutes, but they're not nearly as big of a disaster as they had been. I think part of that is because we're just playing DJ, and we looked at the net rating stuff before, and when DJ is on the floor, like he's the backup big that has the least bad net rating. He can screen, he can rebound, that sort of like, and that. It's all you need to be able to do to play with Jamal and Russ and spell Jokic for a few minutes. And I do think that more scrutiny is going to start to be coming on the starting lineup, which is still really good. It's still one of the best lineups in the league, as we've discussed. But, early in the season, we were talking about it being like a plus 18, and I never expected that to last. But they're down to plus 13 now. And I'm kind of watching to see, like, how far is that going to fall? Like, how well have they been playing? They've been getting out to good starts in these games. Some of the, like, second quarter closing hasn't been as good, but they usually bounce back, and that's been, good. But that's the kind of thing that, they're probably evaluating when they try to decide if there are going to be trades and,
Well, we knew Christian
whatever
Brown
it
wasn't
is.
going to keep shooting 50% from three. So
That's true. And the defense like needed to improve because even Malone said it was after the Heat game where he's like, you're not always going to shoot as well as you guys are right now. I think he was talking about how they were like first in points per game.
oh
Not
god,
just setting points per game in 2024.
yeah.
But he didn't expect that to last. It hasn't lasted, even though like they're keeping up their pace. They're still scoring like relatively well. Again, still a top 5 offense, but the defense needs to be better. And it would be great if we could bring in some help at the point of attack instead of another
That's what we
defensive
need.
liability.
I know.
But anyway, this was the MVP discussion. Was there anything else that you wanted to say on this? We'll probably be talking more about Jokic's MVP, his actual MVP case, and the kind of season that he's been having because it is like really like ridiculous.
If he averages a 30-point triple-double and the Nuggets offense when he's playing is the highest in the league, I think he has a very good case, and you just got to get the seeding up there enough. The reality is that even if Grant and I don't care about the wins, the voters are going to care about it.
Yeah.
So the Nuggets are going to have to get some wins. And I just think Jokic is doing everything he possibly can to affect winning. Like, I think it's like maximized because he's having like arguably the best season of his career, at least offensively. I know we already criticized his defense a bit, but I don't care about defense when it comes to MVP.
Well, I know you don't care about defense, but defense contributes to winning, and winning is value. It also contributes to your net rating on the floor, by the way. So
True.
I think he's been actually like pretty like decent to good defensively over the last few games. So hopefully that continues, but it also helps when the guys around you are helping out on that end. Everybody has to be doing their job on that end of the floor. Yeah, I hope the Nuggets go on a winning streak, and then we can crown Jokic MVP for the 4th time. Regardless of how the season ends, like in the postseason.
I want the 4th MVP just for the historic like company that he would be in then.
I'm not one of those people, by the way, that doesn't like, we've talked about this so many times on the show, but for the people that are fighting us for the first time, first of all, if you made it to this point in the show, thank you so much. But second of all, I care a lot about the regular season. I think it matters where you finish in the seeding. I think it matters the things that the regular season reveals about your offense, about your defense, about your strengths, about your limitations, because I think that they ultimately come out in the playoffs one way or the other. I'm not one of those like, Phoenix Suns that were just like, we just got to make the playoffs. We just got to make the 6 seed. Like, no, like I want to be at least a top 4 seed. I still think they can be a top 3 seed, honestly, this year.
That's what I would want.
But they need to start playing like it. I think they can. And I think they have started playing like it. Maybe not so much in the last Kings game because giving up the 23-point lead, not great. But it's also kind of on par with like the Nuggets of the past that have also been good teams, but, tricked away large leads. But in the past, they would have lost to the Kings on the road. Like, I don't even remember the last time I saw the Nuggets win a Kings game on the road. So that was actually, I think, a solid win. And so was the Clippers. Like, just try to take care of the teams that are below you. Win a couple games against the teams that are above you in the standings. And for the love of God, stop losing to the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, don't do that again. Listeners, thank you so much for spending the time and hanging out with us. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching this and you liked what you saw, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing so you don't miss future shows. And the Clip channel where we'll upload clips and snippets from the show. Remember, winning is fun and losing always sucks.
Sure does. But winning is awesome.